Hi everyone, this is Kumar this side and welcome back to Chemistry Universe. And in this particular video, we're going to start with the lesson after carboxylic acids. We have just finished carboxylic acids and this is amines. So this is part 1 of amines. And in this, we're going to talk about basically introduction to what are amines, some classification of amines. Amines are a slightly different type of functional groups compared to alcohols, even though both of them are non-carbon containing functional groups. So in that sense, they are similar, but there is a lot of difference in terms of classification. And we'll also discuss some common names in this particular video. So let's get on with it and let's begin amines part 1. All right, so basic introduction. Let's get on with the introduction. What are amines? Well, amines are basically derivatives of ammonia in which one or more hydrogen atoms are replaced by alkyl or aryl groups. So if you have ammonia and replace the H with, let's say, an alkyl group, let's say CH3, you will get CH3NH2. That is an amine. You can replace 2 of the H and those 2 H are replaced by, let's say, alkyl or aryl groups, and they could be different or same. You could replace all the 3 for that matter, and they are all amines. And amines are classified as primary, secondary or tertiary depending on the number of alkyl or aryl groups attached to nitrogen atom. Now, this is where I said, things get a little interesting. Now, I want to make this very clear in amines so that you understand what we are talking about. You see, what happens is that if we are looking at amines and alcohols, so if I look at alcohol, the functional group is OH, right? Now, the nature of the alcohol, primary alcohol, secondary alcohol, tertiary alcohol, is defined based on the nature of carbon which contains this OH. So if it is only methanol, well, it is simply methanol. It is not primary, secondary or tertiary because this carbon is neither primary, secondary or tertiary. But if this carbon were attached to one carbon, so this is the alpha carbon, remember? If this is attached to one carbon, it's a primary carbon, right? So the alcohol is deemed primary. Now, if this carbon is attached to 2 carbons, so say I've got a CH, CH3, CH3, and then OH. Now, this would be a secondary carbon, and therefore this alcohol is a secondary alcohol. And if this carbon was attached to 3 carbons, C and 3, let us say, alkyl groups, of course, they need not be CH3. This carbon, this alpha carbon is a tertiary carbon and the alcohol becomes a tertiary alcohol. So that is how a primary alcohol, secondary alcohol and tertiary alcohols are distinguished or classified. With amines, it's different. In all these cases, if I replace the OH with NH2, so let's say this is NH2, this is NH2, here also you have NH2. Here also you have NH2. All these are primary amines. Can you see the difference? Because the primary amine is not defined by the nature of the alpha carbon. It is defined by the number of alkyl groups present on N. Now, the reason is that in an alcohol, we already know that an alcohol will have an O and the O has to be attached to an H. So that means an alcohol will only be attached to one carbon at all times. So the number of carbons attaching to oxygen is not the criteria. It is the nature of the alpha carbon which is the criteria for defining a primary, secondary or a tertiary alcohol. But because if suppose you remove the H of O and replace it with another alkyl group, it becomes an ether. So if I remove this H and I see, okay, I'll put another alkyl group, it becomes an ether. It's no more an alcohol. So secondary alcohol, primary alcohol, tertiary alcohol are not defined by the carbon atoms attached to oxygen because they will always be only one. But not so in the case of amines, because in amines, the property of an amine is a function of the lone pair on N, not the number of hydrogen is attached to it. In alcohol, it is the functional group is OH. Remember, the OH bond is very important for alcohol. Whereas for an amine, it is not the H it has. Of course, the number of H will also make a difference to its property. But the major reason an amine is called an amine is because of the lone pair on nitrogen. Therefore, if there is only one carbon attached to an H2, irrespective of what that carbon may be, primary, secondary, or tertiary, it is still a primary amine. If you have a secondary amine, then it must be attached to two alkyl groups. The nitrogen itself must be attached to two alkyl groups. This is a secondary amine. And if it were attached to three, which means it won't have any H, that would be a tertiary amine. So this is the basic difference between an alcohol classification of primary, secondary, and tertiary, and an amine classification of primary, secondary, and tertiary. Okay, so let's get on with it. Next is the classification. So we can classify them into aliphatic and aromatic. Aliphatic amines are those in which there is an aliphatic group attached to nitrogen, like for example CH3 or maybe even an alkene group. They're all aliphatic. Aromatic are the ones obviously where an aromatic ring is directly attached to the nitrogen of the amine, like for example aniline. You can even have this. And among secondary and tertiary amines, this classification will not work if both aliphatic and aromatic groups are attached together. Which means if one alkyl group is aliphatic and the other is aromatic, because in a secondary amine you will have two R groups attached to the nitrogen. In a tertiary you have three R groups attached to nitrogen. So you cannot classify them as aliphatic or aromatic if they are mixed. So aliphatic aromatic is more workable for primary amines only. Alright, so as I said, primary means when one hydrogen of ammonia is replaced by an aliphatic or aromatic group. Secondary amine, when two hydrogens of ammonia are replaced by two aliphatic or two aromatic or a mix of the two. And tertiary, when three hydrogens of ammonia are replaced by three aliphatic, three aromatic groups or a mix of the two. Okay, let's get some common names out of the way. These are important common names. You must remember them. For example, the simplest one is benzoamine, or we can call it aniline. It's rather it's benzeneamine, aniline. And if you take orthomethyl aniline, it will be called toluidine. The common name is toluidine, orthotoluidine, 2-methyl benzeneamine. Then you need to know this, and we already know its common name, Pyrrole. The common names are more important. And of course, it is 1-aza-cyclopentatophodiene. Just go and check out the IUPAC nomenclature. You'll understand. This is pyridine, which we call as azabenzene. This is quinoline, 1-aza-naphthalene. This is called piperidine, which is azacyclohexane. This one is called pyrimidine, which is 1,3-diazabenzene. And this is called pyrazole, 1,2-diazocyclopentatophodiene. So these are some of the common names. And that ends this particular video of introduction, classification, and common names of amines. So that's it for this part. And we'll see you in the next one. Till then, have a nice day. And thank you for watching this.